privilege a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. And Pastor, thanks for the invitation. I really do appreciate, when churches are taking the initiative to do more in the area of mental health. This next few weeks, I think we're going to be going through a series of looking at some of the common mental health problems that perhaps a lot of us do struggle with. And this evening, as Pastor said, it is going to be the introductory part of the series. And I would love that we make it more interactive. I hate to be able to sit and talk for nearly an hour without any interaction. So what I normally do with some of my presentations is that I may speak for about 10 to 15 minutes and then allow about 5 minutes or so for any questions, any comments that people want to then interject with. We can then have a conversation, a discussion, and then we will carry on for another 10 or 15 minutes and take another 5 minutes for comments or contribution or questions, so that people don't have to wait till the very end, in which case sometimes you might have forgotten what it is that you wanted to share. So please bear in mind, let's make it interactive. We're all learning and see how best we can do this to be able to make it effective and helpful to all of us. So just as a way of starting, let me just say that mental health is something that affects everyone. Everyone has, just like we have our physical health, we also do have our mental health. I think that I'm saying that, on the outset, because I do remember some time back, I went to do a presentation to a group at a retreat, and one gentleman made the comment that, from where he was coming from, this whole issue of mental health and in particular depression was something that we didn't really talk about. And yet all of a sudden we're hearing this mental health stuff that's supposed to be for a particular group of people, but not everyone, which I found quite interesting. And I think as a church for a long time, the church is one that prides itself about health. And yet we heard so much about physical health, how we should, eat, the things we should eat and exercise and everything, and yet very little in the area of mental health. So it's really something that, as Pastor said, I'm really passionate about. I am, because I've come to realize this isn't a problem that only affects a particular group or a particular race or a particular age group or a particular sort of class or background, but this is something that pretty much affects everyone. If you remain a human being, we all have mental health. Sometimes your mental health might be taking a bit of a hit because of a particular situation you might be going through, but one way or the other, as long as we remain human, mental health is something that affects all of us. So I just kind of very quickly wanted to really look at, okay, so we're always talking about mental health. How do we even define mental health? So just doing a bit of a scan around research now, just trying to figure out what sort of definition do we have out there to really define mental health. So I picked something up from the NHS England, and this comes from a policy that they call No Health Without Mental Health policy. So in other words, you can't claim to have a holistic health just because you might be good in your physical health. If your mental health is struggling, then there is no health at all. But this is what they came up in terms of definition. I just want us to pay attention to perhaps some key words or phrases in this definition. Mental health is defined here as the positive state of mind and body, feeling safe and able to cope with a sense of connection with people communities, and the wider environment. Now, when you think about some of the key phrases or words used in here, it may suggest that as human beings, this is something that everybody experiences. So we're talking about a positive state of mind and body. Well, we all have mind, I like to think, and we all have body. So there, right there is something that all of us can identify with. Then talking about feeling safe and able to cope. There is so much in this life, and in fact, a lot of us, the way we live, usually you would find driven by fear or the need to be safe in what we do. So whether it's about the relationships we form or the occupation we find ourselves in, or the outlook we have on life, or the future goals we may have, many of these you may find are tied in very closely to do with fear, and therefore the need to feel safe, the ability to cope. I mean, which one of us don't find ourselves needing to deal with life stresses of some kind? Is there all the time. So it's a question of how do we cope when things become tough? How do our mental health gets affected when life becomes that bit overwhelming or overstressed, overstretched? So feeling safe, needing to be able to cope, again, you would find these are things that affect all of us. And then it talks about the sense of connection with people. One of the very basic things for any human being is the need to feel loved and to feel belonged or connected with someone. Now, as Christians, if we go all the way back, to Eden, one of the things that God created right from the start is for us to be able to relate, to connect. In the Garden of Eden, the Bible let us know that God will come in the cool of the day to fellowship, connect with our first parents. It's so essential to our well-being and our living that the inability to connect, or when we find people get to a stage where they tend to withdraw because of whatever they might be going through, you may find this sense of withdrawal, isolation, is something that usually can be a trigger for some mental health issues, or actually it can maintain problems that people face. Over the last couple of years, I don't need to tell anyone, the whole issue of COVID and isolation, we know from mental health charities that it has escalated people's mental health. The fact that we could not do what we used to do, relate, fellowship, connect, that has caused a lot of problems for a lot of people. So that sense of connection is so important to us and to our existence, and then the whole community and the wider environment. So when we talk about mental health and you look at this definition and some of the key elements of it, there is no one that is excluded from issues around mental health or the need to actually have a positive mental health in that sense. So how does, when we talk about mental health, good mental health, poor mental health, what would good mental health, for example, look like to anyone? Some of the things you would find when you talk about good or positive mental health would include stuff like positivity, attitude, life, optimism. In terms of logical thinking, rational thinking, you think about sort of people's attitude, their outlook on life, the way they relate, resilience, maybe some of the key things that we're looking for when we come across particular triggers in life, when we experience those losses, when we go through a phase in life where there are significant changes. How do we relate? How do we address these issues? The sort of attitude we come with these things would indicate the sort of optimism that we may bring would indicate where we are as far as our mental health is concerned. Are we positive towards these things? Or when an issue or an event happens in your life, where does your mind tend to go? Where does your behavior tend to lie? Or how does that show how much you may be relating or dealing with this event? Your life stresses may indicate where you are, whether or not you are experiencing positive mental health, or actually your mental health may be struggling in the wrong direction. When we talk about mental health, again, what could be some of the things that usually might serve as precipitating factors that may cause someone's mental health to suffer? So some of the factors that we may come across would include things like learned behaviors. The Bible has a lot to say about training a child in the way he or she should go. And when he or she is old, that they wouldn't depart from it. Do you know that there are a lot of anxiety disorders that are purely learned behaviors? So let me give you an example. A child growing up in an environment where parents were overly worriers. They worry about almost everything. And in the church, I've come across a lot of people that will say, oh, I'm a worrier. I worry about everything. I worry even when I don't have things to worry about. And what we forget is that children learn more from what they see than what they hear. And when a child grows up in an environment where parents are constantly living on the edge, constantly being anxious, or for some parents who may suffer with some particular anxiety disorders, and we'll talk a lot more about specific disorders in the series, like obsessive-compulsive disorder, there are things you would find the parents will be doing. So some parents will overly check things. They check the cookers, they check the light switches, they check the television, they check the hair straighteners, they check in the door a number of times. They'll get in the car, they'll get out to go out. Around the block, 5 minutes later, they'll turn, they'll come back, they'll check whether the door was locked. And when these behaviors are continuing in the environment, that child that is growing up begins to learn that this is the way to be. If you're going to be safe, going back to the definition from the NHS, needing to be safe as human beings are paramount. They are basic things that we need in life. And when the child learns that this is the way to be, as they grow, you would find that some of these behaviors begin to sift through the way they live. And then as they grow, if they then have their own kids and they continue to replicate and to perpetuate these behaviors, their children also learn, and then they pass it on. And before you know it, there are intergenerational problems that are being created. So environment is key, and that those learned behaviors, negative learned behaviors, can then have an impact on the person's mental health as they grow. Another precipitating factors, abuse. Again, we'll talk more about this when we come to talk about things like post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma. There are a lot of abusive situations that happens in our homes. For some of us, this may have something to do with culture. For some of us, it may be in even the church environment that we've grown up in. And that sometimes some of us may even use our religion, our faith, scripture, to actually abuse in our homes, abuse in the church. And these things, again, would have the potential to affect the mental health of some of our communities, our homes, and the church at large. And again, as I said, we'll talk more specific and examples when we come to talk about trauma and things like post-traumatic stress disorder as we go along. And then there is also biological makeup, chemical imbalance that sometimes we would hear about. So for example, somebody goes to a GP, is struggling with depression, you'll be given specific medication to try and boost the chemicals in the brain like serotonin. And again, we'll talk about some of the factors that sometimes might contribute to the reduction of those chemicals, those brain chemicals that may contribute to your mental health suffering. Then we've got societal, cultural pressures. Growing up in the environment that I grew up, I know that sometimes some of the cultural pressures that are put on our young people, on people in general, can exacerbate problems with our mental health. So very quickly, if I can give you an example, I remember a friend of mine that we used to share this as a joke. And we'll talk about how, for instance, society would place these expectations of you growing up, you're expected to be given education. So you go through school and you finish school and you do your sixth form or your college, and you finish that and you go to university and you finish uni and you get a nice job and a nice car and a nice house and a nice wife or husband, and you have your lovely, amazing children, and you live happily ever after till your old age, and you look after your grandkids who are all going to be amazing until the time that the Lord calls you, and that is the life cycle that society places on us. What happens when that young person simply doesn't have that mental ability to actually even do well in school and therefore can't meet those expectations? What happens when that young person who is expected to just go through school and breeze through the learning and social and all that education is supposed to come with, and end up experiencing a lot of abuse and bullying from peers and being made to isolate from others and ostracized from the peer groups and everything else? What happens if that young person manages to finish and go to uni and graduates and can't find that job that perhaps he's been studying so hard for? And what happens if even he is so fortunate to have all those things, and yet for some reason is come of age and can't find that amazing woman or man for a life partner? And what happens if they are fortunate enough to have that, and after a year or 2 or 3 of marriage, they're trying for a baby and it's simply not happening? Or even what happens when they actually try and the woman gets pregnant, but somehow can't hold the baby and has miscarriage. Sometimes maybe not even once or twice, it could be 3 or 4 times. But by nature of what it is, they can't even share that openly with people to get the support. And that couple has to live with the pain and isolation of dealing with the trauma and the loss of the baby. And what happens if they are blessed enough to have those children and they go through the school and they're doing so well, but somehow they hit those wonderful teenage years, and somehow they think that, well, this whole living at home and doing what parents are asking and going to church and everything else is really not for me anymore, and therefore the kids decide to leave church. The impression that these parents that have been perceived as this wonderful family, all of a sudden things begin to fall apart. And what happens when your young person that have always been so obedient, will be in church, will do what they're told, get to those wonderful years and turn around and tell you, a parent, actually, I'm a homosexual, I'm a lesbian. In fact, nowadays, there are so many terminologies that sometimes I'm actually trying to get my head around to understand what's going on. So they might be gender fluid, which means that Today, they might decide they are male, or tomorrow they are female, or the next day they are something else. How do you cope as parents when all of a sudden the expectations that society has placed on you seem to be shattering, and everything that you have known seems to be going by the wind? How do you deal with any of those things? Culturally, sometimes the pressure from your own cultures or the pressure from society at large is so much that many of us, as parents, as young people, we really truly begin to struggle with our mental health. And then you have the issues around loss and grief. I mean, dare I tell you about loss and grief just over this last 2 years? I was speaking with a gentleman only last week, an Asian a gentleman, and during COVID, for this last 2 years, he alone has lost about 17 members of his family. 17 through coronavirus. You know, these are siblings, parents, cousins, uncles, and in his description, the worst part of it is that with all these losses, many of whom he couldn't even attend any funeral. And we know that when people experience loss, and sometimes even the process of the funeral, and after that has happened, and burial and all those processes, it helps to bring some closure to what people have experienced. 17 losses, and you couldn't attend any of these. How do you even get closure to these issues? Mental health issues. And then, of course, fear and insecurities. And as I said earlier, a lot of us, our lives are driven by fear on a day-to-day basis. Fear that your children going out to school, whether they will return home safely. Fear that the person that you claim to love and you're living with, whether they're actually ever going to be with you for the rest of your life. Fear that the job that you probably love so much, whether your company is going to get up tomorrow and decide they are restructuring everything, and therefore you may find yourself with no job. Fear that you'll be able to keep up with your mortgage payments until you are finally able to pay for that. Fear that you're able to keep your health, let alone to be able to manage everything that life throws at you. So a lot of us will live our lives daily driven by fear. And then loneliness, again, loneliness could come as a result of so many factors. For some people, maybe because of loss. For some people, maybe because they simply haven't found someone. For some people, maybe because of self-esteem issues. They can't really socialize, they can't mingle, so they tend to isolate and they keep themselves to themselves. And loneliness will come in so many shapes and forms that, again, can contribute to a person's mental health issues. Let me just stop here and just allow people to perhaps chip in with any questions, any comments, any experiences that you may have that you want to actually just share with us at this stage, and then we'll carry on maybe after 5 more minutes. So anyone at all, any question, any comment, any experience you want to share, this is your time. Thank you.
Hi, Emmanuel. This is Trevor.
Hi.
Yeah, where you were saying like, when have you got good mental health? I think the bottom line is that you have good mental health when you're happy. Whether someone else's point of view, they may not be happy with your life, but if you're happy with your life and your faith and what you're doing, that is your good mental health.
Thank you, Trevor. Really, really important point. And it is an important point because, again, talking about how many of our lives are driven by fear, you would be amazed to see how many of us and our lives are driven by other people's perceptions. So the fear of what people think of us, drives so much of what we do, even when it's detrimental to our mental health. So to be able to find that happiness, that contentment within yourself, in a way protects you from whether or not what people might be thinking, saying of you, right, wrong. If you are happy within who you are, what the Lord has blessed you with, a lot of the time, of course, that promotes a positive mental health. So thank you very much for raising that point. Anybody else?
I think there was a question in the chat. I can read that aloud.
Okay, please.
It says, what if somebody does not feel connected, living abroad, single with no family, and does not attend physical church, just online programs?
Okay, thank you very much. A very important question. I highlighted the need to be able to connect because it is essential to our well-being. So if you don't feel connected, and I think you've highlighted a few things there, single person living abroad, maybe church used to be one way of connecting, but of course, the last couple of years, we know most people have not been able to do that. One of the things that we have sort of encouraged people to do during this last 2 years in particular is that in as much as social media has its all negative and terrible things that happen on there, it has been the one way that people have been able to connect. So if it's a case that you need to try making time to connect with friends, which you can do via social media. Yes, it's not the same as seeing someone face to face. Social media, looking at people online, a lot of people would argue it would never replace actually being with someone face to face. But at least it's something that can bridge that gap. So you can still try to connect with people via social media if you're in a position where being able to actually meet with people physically is extremely difficult. Thankfully, we know that some of these restrictions are going to be done away with. So life as we used to know it, at least we might try and get as close as possible. And let me also say that I think that over this last perhaps few months, where restrictions has not been as tough as they used to be, people have been trying to still try to connect physically. And even if you have to do that, socially distancing, at least you can still be in a space where you see someone and therefore you can still connect. Now, if the problem of connecting is because there are underlying, perhaps mental health issues, like maybe social anxiety, for instance, then I guess the issue here then becomes one that you may need to seek the appropriate support to be able to overcome that so you can actually be able to then connect. Connecting is so important, and I can't say that enough, that God himself created us to be able to connect. And if there are barriers to connecting, we need to look for those barriers and we need to look at how to address them. As I said, for some of us, it may require professional intervention. If that is what it takes, then I would encourage you to seek that support. But if it's just because restrictions had made it impossible, then use social media in a way to still connect. Some of us who live overseas, those in the diaspora, and you've got families back wherever, Africa, America, Asia, Australia, wherever, a lot of the time, the only way to connect really is via social media. That we can still do even here. But beyond that, if there is any chance you can connect physically, please take the advantage. Make it an important part of your well-being and actively seek to try and do that. I hope that answers the question. Okay, if there isn't any more questions at this stage, then I would try to move on with your permission. So mental health problems, again, we talk about mental health. Some of it we know about them. Things like, so some examples, we've got a whole heap of anxiety disorders. These are common mental health problems. So we talk about social anxiety, we talk about obsessive-compulsive disorder. As I said, some of these I will talk more in depth about them when I talk about anxiety disorders in particular. So you've got specific phobias. You know, there are those who are scared of spiders. There are those who are scared of open spaces. There are those who are scared of seeing somebody being sick. There are those who are scared of snakes. You know, for me, coming from Africa, it was quite interesting to see that here in the UK, people keep snakes as pets. And I used to think, why on earth would anyone want to keep a snake as a pet? Because from my country in Africa, if you see a snake, there are two things. Either you kill it or it kills you. So we don't joke with this whole business of petting a snake. Come on. But there are people who have specific phobias of all sorts. And then there are those who struggle with panic attacks. And again, we'll talk a bit more in detail about some of these: agoraphobia, health anxiety, and of course, generalized anxiety disorder, which usually has a lot also involved around people who worry excessively. And then we've got depression. And again, there are various types of depression that people struggle with. So we have major depression, we have dysthymia, which tends to be a lighter form of depression, but usually you're talking a minimum that people would have experienced that for about 2 years or more. We have bipolar disorders or unipolar disorders. You have psychotic depression that usually have some form of symptoms similar to psychosis involved in that. You have seasonal affective disorders. Some of us, when it comes to winter, we don't do very well at all. And you would find that, you know, every winter life is that little bit harder. We struggle, and for some of us, we have some serious craving for some specific foods and stuff like that. But the moment spring shows up, amazingly, life is all wonderful again. So, and then of course, for our amazing mothers and our women, we have you know, PND, postnatal depression. And let me also point out that nowadays postnatal depression isn't something that only women suffer. Now, somebody might think, well, but men don't carry babies. Why should they have postnatal depression? Well, let me tell you, husbands or men also do struggle with postnatal depression. Again, we'll talk more about that when we come to looking at the various types of depression that people struggle with. So there are all that with depression. Then we've got eating disorders, those that struggle, various problems with eating, like anorexia or bulimia, PTSD that I mentioned. Then there are also complex mental health issues like psychosis, schizophrenia, and other types of mental health issues like Alzheimer's, or which may also include things like dementia. These are just some. These are by no means the exhaustive list of all the mental health issues that we, or us people, some of us do struggle with from time to time. So kind of brief. Now, as a church, as people, as individuals, would you say that we do have significant, maybe mental health issues in our church? Somebody might say yes, no. But if we are to go by the stats, the numbers, what the numbers tell us, and the numbers tell us that 1 in 4 will suffer a mental health disorder in a given year, then essentially, whether in church, out of church, we are not exclusive. You know, we are not out of the woods. And a friend of mine used to joke about how to identify whether you may be one in that four. That, for example, you might be sitting in church, you look on your roll, and there are about 4 people sitting there. And if you look at the first 3 and they seem to be doing okay, then maybe you might be the 4th person that might be struggling. But of course, we can't identify mental health from just by looking at people. As a people, we can be very good in masking the mental health stuff that we struggle with. And again, when we come to talk in detail, we'll probably get to some of the underlying causes that would amplify the fact that none of us are immune to mental health issues. Your status in society does not make you immune. Whether you may be young or old, age does not make you immune. You might be the church elder or the church pastor. We have heard stories even within the BUC, where I think years back, we have a minister or someone that had taken their own lives. And these are issues that are littered across our congregations. People that struggle with depression. Sometimes ask yourself, for example, that person that comes to church, why is it that for some reason they always are keeping themselves to themselves and not necessarily integrating with other people? There are so many factors that come into play when we come together as a people. A lot of these sometimes are underpinned by various mental health issues that we struggle with. So again, very briefly, what may be some of the consequences of mental health issues that may not be addressed? So if somebody is living with, for example, a problem with depression for some time, and they're not seeking support for it, what are some of the challenges that they might face as a result of that? For some people, some of the consequences may be sleep problems. There are some of us who can't sleep. I was speaking with this gentleman, I think only yesterday or so. He lost his wife through separation, divorce. He lost his parents. I'm talking about somebody who is quite old, in his late 50s. He doesn't have any kids, and because he's had these issues that hasn't sought support for a while, some of the impact on him at the moment are constant, chronic sleep problems. If he manages to get an hour or 2 sleep a day, hallelujah, he will go through the night. He will struggle to fall asleep. If he does fall asleep, he might not even last an hour and he'll be up. And then the mind just kicks in and is running 1,000,000 miles per hour, and he'll be lying there trying to fall asleep, but somehow the sleep seems to have disappeared. He just can't find it. So his experience is that he would then get up, maybe go to the kitchen around 3 a.m. That's when he's making a curry to have something to sleep, to eat. And eating problems because of poor mental health. For some people, concentration levels becomes a problem. For others, socializing is an issue because we tend to isolate so much that we don't engage, we don't socialize. Our mental health then struggles. For others, it might be relationship issues when we failing to address the mental health challenges that we have. So in so many ways, for others, it may impact your job. I can't tell you how many people have had to take time off. For some people, they've had to be off for a month, 2 months. For some people, even up to 6 months that they can't be at work. Now, imagine you are self-employed, and because of mental health, you have to take this amount of time off, and you have no source of income. The family then begins to struggle because your home economy struggles. So in so many ways, you talk about church. When we have serious relationship problems in church, a lot of these things, again, may have their roots in poor mental health. So there are so many ways that poor mental health are affecting our lives from day to day to day. And if we don't address these issues and we continue to wear our masks, because one of the amazing things of our Adventists, every Sabbath we come to church is a happy Sabbath. And everyone you meet and you say happy Sabbath, we have this wonderful smile that we put on. And we'll sit in church and we'll pretend everything is amazing. And for some of us, we are leaving church and already thinking whether or not we want to be here the next day. So it is something that affects everyone, as I already said, the rich, the poor, the young, the old, the affluent, the not so affluent, the powerful in high positions, the not so powerful, the older, the younger, the teenagers, even children. I heard of a case where a 9-year-old took her own life. 9-year-old. And I've seen young people at the age of 10, 12, 14 who have attempted suicide more than once. And again, when we talk about depression, we'll talk more about suicide prevention and all these things again in the hopefully the next part of the series, i.e. being next week. So I guess in closing for this session, what I'd like to highlight that maybe we can all start to do if we are struggling, some of the things we can do as basics to look after our mental and emotional well-being, making sure you try to get some good sleep. Gadgets have become part of our lives. By trying to get a good night's sleep would mean no gadgets in the room. And maybe we can talk more about sleep and some basic sleep hygiene, in future. You may need to get rid of the gadgets in your bedroom and try and associate your bedroom as the place for sleeping, not the place for gaming, not the place for eating. The young people of today, everything happening in the bedroom. Conversations with friends happen in the bedroom. Eating happens in the bedroom. Gaming happens in the bedroom. Studying happens in the bedroom. No conversation with parents and the rest of the family because everything is happening in the bedroom. We may just need to retrain what and how we associate our bedroom in terms of what it's supposed to be for. So getting some good night's sleep will be useful. When we talk more about sleep hygiene, we'll highlight some of the things that we can do to help make that a reality. And if you can get the 7 to 8 hours that we talk about, that would be fantastic. There are some people who don't necessarily need a lot of hours sleep and they will still function okay. If you're one of those people, well, fine. But if you're not, and you need that 7 to 8 hours, try to make it a reality. Exercising is amazing for our mental health. A lot of us, maybe COVID didn't help so much. And so for some reason, we used to go to the gym, but we stopped. Well, thankfully, gyms are opened. We can go back. Even if you couldn't go to the gym, you can go for a walk. Again, some of these things, when we have stopped doing them for a while, it's difficult to go back to them. You can always go back with small baby steps. If you used to go to the gym and you spend an hour or two, 5 days a week, you don't have to start by trying to do 5 days a week, 2 hours every single time you go. Because even the thought of doing that alone can be so daunting, you may end up not doing it at all. Small baby steps. If you used to go 5 days a week, 2 hours, you might want to start by just go and do half an hour, and maybe just once or twice a week as a starting point. And as you then carry on and you begin to enjoy the positive brain chemicals you bring, that will serve as a motivation to want to do more. And then you can keep increasing and improving until you can get yourself back to where you used to be. So exercising, very important. Eating well and drinking enough water. These are basics, but very essential. The things we eat, to a larger degree, can affect our mental well-being. So let's be mindful. That is an area that as a church, we have so much knowledge about, but it's a case of, are we putting them into practice? We can do that, and we can improve our mental and emotional well-being. Talk to someone you can trust, or seek professional help if you need to. Thankfully, we know the NHS is struggling a lot, but there is so much good about the NHS in this country, in that, at least for now, it tries to provide psychological support for anyone that will need it. Yes, it's true, sometimes there may be waiting lists that may be quite long, but you can still get some support. And again, as a church, let me take the opportunity to advertise Cornerstone Counseling Service within the SEC, who have been doing amazing work over the last how many years. I was privileged to have been part of the team for over a decade, and I can tell you they do wonderful, wonderful work. If you need support, just go on the conference website, you'll find information there, contact them, and you can get the support you need. One of the things that also tends to affect us a lot is when we tend to compare our lives with others, and we get into a looping cycle of what we call unhelpful thinking patterns, and in particular, one that comes to mind here being comparing and despairing. When you keep comparing your life to other people, and you're always looking at them as being up there, and you are up there, you are down here, you place them on a pedestal, and at the same time, you then look at your life as one that is unsuccessful, one that is failing, one that is terrible, and that can also have a negative impact on your mental health. Limit your use on social media. Social media, as I said, it has amazing positive benefits, but we also know that everything that goes on social media, in fact, most things that people post on social media are edited. Social media is not like the Bible. God is so amazing. He places the wonderful things in the Bible as well as things that were terrible, so we can learn from it. With social media, people don't post the terrible time that husband and wife had fighting and whatever. They don't post those things on there. They don't post when they feel they're going through some terrible times that they look so horrible. They will post those edited features or pictures that somehow, if they've got gray hair here, there, they'll be able to edit and take all those things out, and they make the picture look so amazing, and they put all those things on there. And then you go and have a look and you think, look at how amazing that person looks, and look at how terrible I look. So let us be mindful of what we are taking in on social media. Let's limit our use, especially of the negative stuff that we see on social media. These are some basics that we can start doing. As I said, connect with people, take up a new hobby. Years back, people used to associate having some fun almost like a sin. But for example, if you're a couple and you take up a hobby of swimming, and you go swimming and you can play silly in the pool and be happy and whatever, these are fun things, but healthy, holy fun, if you want me to add that word, that can be a benefit to our well-being, and absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. The time is just coming up to 8:30, so let me end here for today. And as I said, next week we will start talk a bit more detail about some of these common mental health problems. Next week, I would like us to address depression and also suicide and suicide prevention. So what are the precipitating factors for depression? When a person is going through that, what are the symptoms? What are some of the things that they can do to cope better? And if you are, for example, a family member, you know someone that is struggling, what can you do? What can be your role to help that individual during that journey where they're struggling? When it comes to suicide prevention as well, we will look at what are some of the triggers, what are some of the things to look out for, you know, with people that you're around. Are there particular conversations they have? Are there a line of or sort of language they use that might tell you that perhaps this person is not in a good place? And we can all be all informed or well informed to either look out for others, support others in a healthier way, or actually look after our own mental health in a much better way. So wherever you are next week, please try and make it a date to be here again. Let's talk, let's share, let's learn, let's support, and let's help each other in a much productive way. And thank you all. If anyone have a question or a comment, Pastor, I don't know if we can take 5 minutes very quickly to do that, and then we'll just finish for the evening.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so 5 minutes. If there is a question or a comment or anything anyone wants to share, please do so now, and then we'll wrap up. Yes.
Yes.
Well, the name is Sylvia, but I'm sure it's not
right.
Sylvia's hand that is up.
It's the boss's computer, so.
Right. Okay.
Tell him what your name is.
My name's Garth.
Thank you, Garth.
I'd just like to thank you because I found myself in the picture you were describing, and it began to get a bit uncomfortable. But I've forgotten what I was going to say. I think you've touched on quite a number of points which as individuals and as a church we need to take note of. And I mean, one which wasn't on particularly on what you were talking about, but the fact that, you know, people have been lonely during this period of being shut in and so forth. And perhaps we should have spent more time even arranging online chat times so that members could just join in together and chat and go backwards and forwards. But anyway, I'd just like to thank you for what you've been saying, and I'm looking forward to what's going to come in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. And I think what is lovely here is the fact that Pastor has taken the lead and very much involved with what is happening here. And I'm sure that comment you raised, which probably tied in with what somebody said earlier about loneliness, is something that as a church, we might be able to do something about, even if on a social media platform, like you just said. Let's create something where we come together and we can literally just talk, because there are people that come into church, out of church, and sometimes the only kind of connection they have is when they come to church. In the course of the week, there's nothing else that they have. But you're right, as a church, we can do more, and by all means should do more, so that we can help those who may be struggling. Thank you very much for raising that. But as we talk next week, more about that in the next presentation. Anyone else? We've got a couple of minutes. Right. In the absence of any other questions or comments, I think I will hand back to Pastor. And once again, let me just say thank you for everyone that has joined. This is a forum for us to talk and share and learn. And please, let's come back next week and do more of that. So as I said, we can help each other. As a church, we have a duty. The Bible says, carry each other's burdens. And sometimes we do that when it comes to physical needs, but we can do more when it comes to our emotional side. Pastor.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. On behalf of the elders and the entire church, I just want to say thank you for such a wonderful introduction. We are looking forward to hearing more from you. And thank you, everyone, for making a point to be here. Pastor Garth, that point is noted. And even outside COVID, we will look into creating a kind of a chat platform where anyone can drop in and meet whoever is there to have a conversation. Thank you, everyone. And Elder David, if you don't mind, would you like to? Hello.
Hello there.
Sorry. Did you want to say something?
No,
Right.
not for me.
No, okay. So I think someone just came in accidentally. All right. So to close, I was going to ask Elder David if you can close us with a prayer, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Emmanuel. It's been really enlightening and helpful.
Thank you.
Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for bringing us together this evening. We thank you for Emmanuel, Lord, and all the ways you've led him in his life and in his career and in the resilience you've given him, Lord, and the strength you've given him to help to develop the talents you've given him in this area, and his willingness to be a channel for you, Lord, both to help people professionally and now to help us as well, Lord, to raise our awareness of your leading, of the pain and suffering and joy and opportunities around us. Thank you for the Sabbath. Help us to have a peaceful and also challenging time from you. We pray you'll bless everyone who's been in the meeting tonight, and pray that your Spirit will draw others as you see fit and as we respond. And please especially bless everyone on the platform tonight, Lord, and thank you for encouraging Emmanuel in the ministry you've given him. Jesus, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. God bless you all. We'll see most of you tomorrow. And Brother Emmanuel, have a happy Sabbath. And those that we won't see tomorrow, enjoy your Sabbath. And that's it for tonight. See you next Friday.
Thank you all. Good night.
God bless.
Good night.
Thank you.